And welcome to another edition of the New Sports Outlaws podcast. As always, I am Neil, and this is Dan. Dan, been a lot of stuff to go on in the world of sports this week. Doesn't leave us with a lot going on at the moment, but a lot has happened. So let's dive into it. How are you this week?
Yeah, doing good. There is a lot of sports going on. Definitely. We got the football, we got the basketball, we got some baseball, we got the little bit of hockey. I know Devils and Rangers went at it previously this week. Not so good for the Rangers, I'm sure you didn't like. But yeah, no, we got a lot to dive into. A lot of negatives, but we'll still dive into it. Let's do it.
So let's go with what's on TV right now. And it's the sport that really only sport that matters. And let's talk a little basketball. So we could start with locals first, and we'll start with the Nets since that obviously is our shorter of the segments. But it's not due to the Nets stinking as I anticipated would happen. I mean, I predicted the Nets would have the least amount of wins in the NBA. Their over under was at 19.5. We did mention this last week. And they are killing it. I mean, for them being 9-13, they already have half of what Vegas said would be their win total, pretty much. So, talk to us about your Nets.
Yeah, we were before last week, I believe last Wednesday, where they played the Suns. It was a late game, so we weren't watching at the time. But they actually beat the Suns. They were 9-10 at the time. They have lost 3 straight since then. We lost 2 to the Magic and 1 to Chicago. So we're at 9-13 right now. But it's kind of expected, meaning like there's going to be the games where we're fighting our asses off. We look prepared. We look good, and are we're being the players that we have are being put in good positions, and kind of like today, we're being the Pacers by 16 for whatever reason right now. And then there's going to be games like a couple against, like really against the Bulls, where our lack of talent is just going to show up. Where the Bulls they still have Zach LaVine, even though he's not as he was before. Vucevic is still a good center in the league. So there's definitely going to be those games and lulls where our lack of talent is just going to show, and we're going to lose our fair amount of games. Now we're definitely going to go over that 19.5. We're definitely going to 20.
You
But
you might
nine
be
and
there.
13.
You might be there by the All Star break.
But by 9-13, and I believe I saw that Jordy Fernandez was actually a nominee for Coach of the Month in November.
Makes sense.
I'm not sure who won it. I'm sure I would have known if he would have won it, but I heard he was a nominee. But we're gonna have these games, and I'm excited. I'm not all for the tank right now. It's too early for me to think about tanking. I'm enjoying watching this team right now, and you know,
Not to mention,
we'll
I'd have to double check, but I'm pretty sure the numbers say like it's only happened maybe once or twice in the last decade that the worst team got the first pick. It doesn't usually happen. So you can't really bank, at least in the NBA lot. This is not the NFL. You lose the most games, you should get the shot at the best player. It's not the way it works in the NBA with the lottery system. The question I had for you for the Nets, I've watched more Nets than I have since Jason Kidd was on the Nets. But I didn't have much for you today. The only thing I had for you was, when did Claxton come back? Because I was looking at the box scores. I'm like,
well,
oh my god, he's back.
So he really came back. So he was out at the very beginning of the year, and he kind of came back. I want to say a couple weeks into the season, but then he's been in and out with like a back injury, or like so he's played like 3 or 4 games, but then he's been out for 2 games, in 4 out 2. So he's kind of been in and out. He wasn't really like Cam Thomas is out for like 3 weeks, so it's not like that. He's just kind of been in and out, in and out, and it's kind of think messing with him a little bit because he's definitely a rhythm player, and when he keeps going in and out, he's not looking as good. But yeah, we got a lot of injuries right now. Just trying to get through it to get Cam Thomas and a couple of our guys back.
So as far as our NBA goes, we start with what I thought was our least entertaining topic. I'll go to our second most entertaining topic, which is the NBA in general. Um, the biggest surprise to me so far, and I'll throw this out there to you, the Los Angeles Clippers. I know you're not going to like them. I don't like them either, but as watching highlights, and I'm not staying up and watching Clipper games on the West Coast. They're 14-9. Kawhi has not played yet this year, and I'm like, I had to do a dive into like, how is this team? literally in the middle of the pack in the West. I thought they would be one of the worst teams, especially when in the beginning of the season when we heard that Kawhi was hurt yet again. Um, James Harden is averaging 22, 7, and 9. That's nuts. He's well past his prime. 22, 7, and 9 is beyond respectable for a good player, let alone a player who we thought was absolutely done. And Powell's averaging 24 a game. That you got a lot of players doing a lot of little things, but Harden having all those numbers across the board. I think the thing that stood out to me the most is at his age, averaging 7 boards a game and 9 assists a game were something I didn't expect.
Yeah, even when he was with, I know Houston was a long time ago now, but he was kind of getting triple doubles with Houston, and I'm not sure if they were just if people are. I think it's a little fugazi, but he, yeah. I think with the Clippers, I'll say this: I think in the past when they had Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, and eventually James Harden, and I guess Russell Westbrook to a degree, they were having trouble maybe figuring out who kind of runs the show over there. Maybe. I don't know. Again, I'm not staying up on the West Coast for 10 p.m. games. But it seems like Harden's their guy. So he's their number one guy. So he's going to have the ball 80% of the time. And then everyone else is kind of just falling into place into their roles between Zubac, center, between Powell, like you said. Again, I haven't seen any of their games, so I'm actually surprised to hear that record. I didn't even know that there was a record. But again, when it comes to postseason, Harden's not going to do anything. But anyway, it is a good surprise. I guess they're figuring out their roles and they're playing their roles, and Harden's being the point guard, and he's getting more of the Houston role again a little bit, just without the huge numbers he was putting up in Houston.
Yeah, yeah. And as usual, the West is better than the East. I want to say the second worst team in the West is 500 or one game under 500, whereas no offense to the Nets, who are having I think a good season, are 9-13 and they're in the 9th spot in the East and they're 4 games under
I
500.
I, I remember when the Nets were actually going all right. We had the same record as the Knicks at like the first week of the year, and they were like 5-4, something like that, or even 4-5, whatever it was. And I remember I was saying, if you remember, I was saying, oh, third in the standings or tied for third in the standings. And then you look at the West, 4-5 or 5-4 was like the 8 or the 9 seed at the time, and it
Yeah.
was just it was funny. But yeah, the West is definitely, except for like I guess the top heavy Boston, but and maybe they put the Knicks up there now.
Is there anybody that still believes that the Cavs are serious enough to be considered competent? I know I don't,
Um,
especially when it comes to playoff time.
Against Boston, maybe not. I mean, but that's like the thing. Against the Knicks, I would say no too, because the Knicks and Boston have really had their
And the
number.
and the Knicks really have owned Cleveland. I mean, Boston owns everybody, so I'm not trying to take anything away from Boston. But if there's one team you can say the Knicks have owned in the
I,
last couple of years, it's been
I
Cleveland.
mean, I know the Cavs recently actually just beat Boston, I believe, this past week. They beat them for like their one game. There's like their revenge game, sort of. But
They beat the Knicks
it's only
earlier
three of
too.
them. I mean, it's the Knicks, it's the Celtics, and I know the Bucks have been on a winning streak, so you never know with the Bucks. I don't know if they're starting to come. I really haven't again watched them. I'm not sure if Giannis and Lillard are kind of meshing, but it's really just the three teams right now. I don't consider the Magic anywhere up there right now. They're nowhere
I
close.
think they're good, but I still think they're a little bit away, and they got to get
Maybe when
Ponchero
Becerra
back
goes back,
for
maybe when Becerra goes back.
Caro, yeah. I usually probably say Ponchero because it's funny. Um, so my second NBA headline, I only had two NBA headlines, works into our most important of our NBA topics, which is the New York Knicks. So I guess it's just because the Knicks are better this year and have had luck. I'm into this in-season tournament. Not that this is going to replace the championship tournament. They talk about it on the fan, and I think it would be the Pierre Resistance that the Knicks raise a banner for an in-season tournament, but it's fun, and I think with this team still trying to gel, and the whole thing about, and heard me now for weeks on this podcast talk about the Knicks as they gel, they'll get better. As they gel, they'll get better. I think this could go a long way if they can win a couple of these games, maybe find themselves in a championship game of this NBA in-season tournament, which, by the way, they're the favorites. Um, I think it could help toward this team camaraderie and gelling that I've been talking about.
The only thing I'll say is, now I know I bust your chops about the cup thing, but I actually kind of like it. I like just the competition. I know they were trying to get rid of the whole not trying in November, December kind of thing, and maybe it worked for some teams, but it's something else, and I don't mind it. I like it. It's fine. The courts were fine to look at. I don't mind the new courts. I know I'm not an old head like that. The jerseys were fine. Um, but as for the Knicks, I think that their offense is going to be great. I think we're kind of on that. They're especially as the year goes on. I think they're going to be great. I just think the only thing that's going to bother them, and you probably know this, and they know this, is going to be when they face guards that are really fast and really quick, and that can break down their defense. And obviously the Magic don't have that. I mean, they got absolutely bludgeoned in basically the first half, and then really the third quarter by the Knicks. I think they were down by 40 something at one point. They ended up making it a lot closer than it really was. Um,
And the way the Magic are built, they're not built to come back from a big defeat. They're a team that has got to keep you close and wearing you down because they play good defense typically. And they're not a good 3-point shooting team.
yeah, no, you're absolutely right. They don't. I mean, without especially without their best player, Bancaro, it's definitely all their defense. Like kind of like the Nets. They really what they did was they dirtied up the game, and the Nets don't have anybody that you can really give the ball to without Cam Thomas and say score. So all they did was they ended up playing good defense on them, and that's why. But yeah, the Knicks are looking good right now. They played the Hawks in the quarterfinals. I mean, you guys have pretty much owned the Hawks lately. I know, but that should be no problem. And we'll see how it goes. It's exciting.
Knicks are 8-2 in their last 10, so hopefully this in-season tournament kind of kicks us off into gelling more along the what I hoped to see from the Knicks. So my next notes in when I did my research for our podcast this week was the NFL, but I want to kind of put that on pause because I don't think we're going to talk very long about the other sports. But let's do the other sports quick. And as bad as the New York Giants and Jets are, football in general is much more fun at the moment. So. Hockey quickly. The Rangers suck. They're on fire. There's talk throughout hockey going on that the Rangers could shake it up and trade a bunch of players. They just lost to the Devils. Devils are a good team. It hurts me to say it. They're a very good team. Jack Hughes is an amazing player, and there's more to come. So stay tuned. But it could get quite interesting at
Is their
Madison Square
roster
Garden.
much different than it was last year?
No, and that's the thing.
But
As a
what?
team,
It's only been
yeah,
it's only been 2 months. But
yeah.
I don't know. What's their
So
are they
supposedly
are they
there
in the
could be a
playoffs
lot
right
of
now?
what?
Are they in the playoffs right now?
A little early to tell. I want to say they are,
Okay.
but they started off really good, and it's really more a
Yeah.
product. Where they are right now is more of a product that they started off so good because they have really struggled lately.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, and for our other, obviously, in town sport that means so much to us, hot stove baseball is heating up. We've talked about this personally. We, like everybody else, we're not breaking ground here. We think Juan Soto will set the dominoes off. Whether it's the Yankees get Soto and then the Mets and other teams are making their plan Bs, or the Mets get Soto and then other teams are making their plan Bs. I'll tell you this much for the Juan Soto sweepstakes. I don't think Boston really has a shot. I think they need a
No,
third team in there. I think it's the Yankees or the Mets.
I agree. Um, and I think with this Juan Soto stuff is that it's been dragged on for a while now. And I remember both of us in our chat, we have to get Juan Soto. We have to get Juan Soto, or else, it's the house is going to burn down, kind of thing. And then I think we both listened to the radio, and we both read, and we've kind of talked ourselves into like finding a plan B, just in case the Yankees do lose Soto. And we're listening to radio personalities like Brandon Tierney and the rest of them that are saying that, all right, maybe Soto's not a generational type player. That was his thing on the radio the past couple of days, and he's only a two-tool player, and he does the two tools obviously really well. And then he was getting into all that, and I think what a lot of Yankee fans have done is try to kind of give themselves a little bit of a padding, like in case Soto signs, oh my God, he's gone with the Mets, and then we can all of a sudden Yankee fans can come back and say, oh well, he was worth too much money. Now we can get like 5 other guys that can
Yeah.
fill his spot.
Yep.
So obviously, for I think both of us are in agreement where Soto is definitely the number one priority, and we need to get him.
Yeah.
Um, but again, the Yankees do have other needs. So I think obviously if we get Soto, we're going to go younger. If we don't get Soto, we still might sign some vets and be a little older.
Yep. Um, yeah, and I've quietly said we're in agreement. I still ideally would like him back, but I have, like a lot of Yankee fans, talked myself into the possibility that if we don't sign him, is this the worst thing in the world for us? I know how clutch he was. I know outside a month or two, he had a probably 300 average or better. It was just that month and a half that kind of pulled him down to 285 hitter. Um, yeah, and Hal has not shown the propensity of saying, give me Juan Soto and give me some other players. I don't think it's going to happen. I think if you sign Juan Soto, you're looking at your Brian Cashman's blue light specials. Those of us that are old enough to remember Kmart, the Brian Cashman blue light specials, and he'll try to find outfielders. He pulls off a Rule 5 draft and bullpen pitchers who are thrown on the scrap heap from other teams, and he'll bring those in if he brings in Juan Soto. Conversely, if he doesn't bring in Juan Soto, not that I need 5 studs to be signed in his place, but you can go get 2 to 3 bats and maybe a bullpen and starting pitching arm and still have less payroll added than you would a Juan Soto contract. So I I've talked to some of my teachers at the school I work with. I think as I keep talking about it out loud, I get more and more convinced that it's not the worst thing in the world for us if he doesn't sign, because he'll have more resources to do other things for longer. And you got to try to take advantage of this Judge and Cole window while you have it.
Also remember before we kind of, I guess we'll finish up, we were prepared to give Yamamoto $300 million last year, knowing that Soto was coming this year. So I'm guessing like they know that they're going to have to spend money no matter what. And obviously, if we were thinking about giving Yamamoto $300 million, we were going to end up giving Soto $600 million. And obviously, we were, hopefully, I think, prepared to go through that. So I hope Hal and company are willing to spend. But like you said, we have needs at first base, third base, second. I mean, if we're moving Jazz to second base, backup catcher, still need some pitching. We have a lot of needs. But I do want Soto back. And he carried us that one series, hit that clutch home run. Being clutch in New York, you cannot put an amount on that. I know he only batted 288. I know his outfield his defense is actually a lot worse than I thought. I thought he was actually a pretty good defender, or at least that was the word, I guess. I don't know. But he looked really pedestrian out there,
Yeah.
which was really surprising. But again, he's clutch in New York, and that says a lot.
And
So you
it's
can't put
his
an amount on
age.
that.
Let's call a spade here. He is an excellent hitter. He's very charismatic. His stats showed you what he can do offensively.
He's got a
Uh,
championship too.
but it, and he's also 26 years old. It's unheard of that anybody else has reached free agency at this age. Even Bryce Harper, who was young, was not this young when he hit free agency. So this is something unprecedented. You might not see this again. Somebody that's this level of a player, somebody who's in the MVP conversation every year when he plays to his potential, hitting free agency at 26. And Major League Baseball, the way it's run nowadays with arbitration and everything, and the way they keep players in the minor leagues for so long, this doesn't happen. So this is totally, people are like, oh well, if Soto gets this, where are contracts going to? Let's pump the brakes, because if nothing else, if we're talking generational, maybe he's generational in the fact that you probably aren't getting this combo of age and talent to hit the free agent market
Yeah, his
that
accomplishments
often.
too. I think his accomplishments that he's done over between the World Series ring, um, and between what he did for the Yankees, especially in the playoffs. I think it was more just it's more that, and he's been great. I mean, But hopefully we'll see winter meetings start next Monday.
Yeah,
We should hopefully have a decision by the time our next podcast comes, and we'll definitely have a lot of talk about
that's
that.
the hope. That's the hope. Um, Speaking of hope, I guess we have to keep
And
when it comes to our NFL outlooks here, Daniel. Um, I guess let's start general before we get to the bashing. Let's start general and just talk about. I thought was the hottest topic to come out of Sunday last week. The Al Shahir hit and suspension. He hit Trevor Lawrence as Trevor Lawrence was going down. We can debate uh, the aspects of the hit, but the facts are he hit Trevor Lawrence, gave Trevor Lawrence a concussion. Trevor Lawrence is looks like he's going to be on IR the rest of the
yeah,
year. He got shoulder surgery, and Al Shahir is suspended for 3 games. What do you think?
yeah, no, that was no matter the way you look at it, you just watch replays and when they tell you like they when that definition of launching yourself or launching your go head first at a player, that's exactly the definition of what they do not want you to do. That's like the video that I guess you show rookies at the beginning of when they get drafted and the NFL gives them they have to take the class. It's like you don't do what he did, especially as a defender. And it was really bad. And again, I didn't know who he was beforehand, but obviously he had a history with certain things. With one with Brady, and then he punched the Chicago Bears running back.
And he
She
punched
choked him.
Roshan. He punched
Yeah.
Roshan this year.
So there is no. Yeah, no. I think he should have been out the rest of the year. Personally, if you really want to send a message, I'm not sure if he's getting paid or not. I guess he would have to get paid just because there's a whole CBA stuff about that. But he needs to be out the rest of the year. That just can't happen. And it's only what 4? I think it's only 4 games left anyway. 5 games left anyway. What's 3 games? Just send him out the extra 5. Um, yeah, it's a bad look, and it was really dirty.
Yeah. Um, Listen, I think it's because of his priors. If he had no prior instances, maybe he gets suspended one game. Listen, it was a dirty hit because Trevor Lawrence is giving himself up, and and I understand he launched himself, but not only did he launch himself, his forearm pushes Trevor Lawrence, and that did the real damage. Now, if he dove and launched himself, but then saw Trevor and just like tapped him and and continued his slide over Trevor because he was going over Trevor anyway, you didn't need to literally shove your forearm into his chest and make the guy's head bounce off his chest and neck area and make the guy's head bounce off the turf. That was a dirty play. And then he looked to fight right after. It's like, dude, like wake up. Get a clue of what you just did.
It's
So,
yeah, it was kind of like the guy from Cincinnati back in the day. You remember his name? The guy from Cincinnati, that linebacker.
oh,
That yeah, no, it's all right.
no, I can't.
But he was always getting dirty hits, especially against I think Pittsburgh was definitely one of his big
Perfect,
ones.
perfect. Vontez perfect.
Vontez perfect. Look at you, good job. That's a trivia question right there. But yeah, it's kind of like that where he's just looking to just I guess he was just reacting and he's just like, all right, I'm just gonna fight people now.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's definitely a bad look, and yeah, wasn't pretty.
Yep.
Feel bad for Trevor.
Uh, so I had that from week 13. Excuse me. And the only other thing I had from week 13 was I guess we got to throw our bouquets at the Bills. I think we both, even though you picked Allen to be the MVP, I think we both looked at the Bills in the offseason and we were like, they lost a lot of weapons. Yeah, they could probably win some games. Maybe Josh can get him in the playoffs on his own back. But uh, I mean, I know, listen, I know the Niners are not the Niners, but they took the Niners to the woodshed. The defense has not let up all year where I thought, oh, they're going to crumble. They're going to crumble. They lost so many pieces. They're holding their own to the point where you really got to consider them to be the odds-on favorite to come out of the AFC, especially if they can get KC to have to come up there in a snowstorm and face them.
Yeah, no, I think their defense is the more surprising part. I think we all I mean, I know I did, but I think in majority they expected Josh Allen to kind of maybe not be as good offensively, but they knew he's good enough to carry that team And I know they actually more expected Keon Coleman to kind of be their number one. In fact, it's Shakir who's really their kind of number one, I guess, if you want to say. Um, but between him, James Cook has been really good, especially lately. Fantasy. And
I have him in Dynasty.
their defense has really been good. And it's not just the 49ers. I know Purdy was hurt, CMC got hurt. They're kind of falling apart. And unfortunately for them, I don't think they have enough to kind of get out of it. Um, but yeah, I think that CMC injury is also another key from that game. Just him being out for the year, and just him being going back to kind of like the Carolina days where he was often injured.
And the last thing I have for you generally from the NFL, Daniel, is something that I don't know I've ever said, at least on this podcast, or ever I've talked to you. And you and I have been friends for, I mean, it's coming close to 2 decades. The most anticipated game I have for this week is the Thursday night game. I'm interested to see if Green Bay can stand up to Detroit. Detroit has looked good, but has had moments here or there where they sleepwalk through a game and win at the last second, struggle with teams we didn't think they should struggle with. And then they've had games where they blow the doors off people. So I'd like to see what happens here. I looked at the slate of games. We didn't make our picks. I wouldn't have picked this game anyway because it's just too competitive of a game. I want to look for better lines that I like. And we both had good weeks picking last week. You had the first 4-0 week. But yeah, I that's the most interested I am of any game this week.
Yeah, no, it's like you said with Detroit, they've had a couple. I think they blew out the 49ers, I want to say a couple weeks ago or a few weeks back. That's when they really like, and everyone's like, oh, crap, this is the team, this is their time. And then they sleepwalked I forgot who they played 2 weeks ago, but they kind of sleptwalked through that game. They won it by one possession. And then you could argue during that Chicago game, they maybe should have lost that game if that Chicago coach, Eberflus, didn't flub up the clock. And they definitely would have been a field goal. I think did they need a touchdown? Yeah,
I think a field goal to tie, a touchdown to win.
Yeah, and I think they were at like the 40-yard line with like 40 seconds left. So they had a legitimate shot. I think they were up like 21-0 or 21-3 or something. Then they came back. But this is Green Bay's kind of shot to, like, all right, we're going to kind of show we're kind of back, or we're kind of where we were last year. They seem like they got their formula now. Now that they're not really leaning on Jordan Love, it seems like Josh Jacobs has really kind of taken over lately. Their running game, they'll use their receivers as
They
kind
have,
of
they have a
mentioned previously.
ton of weapons. Yeah, a ton of different receivers.
Yeah, it seems like they've been using that, and they kind of found their formula offensively.
Yep. Okay. So I guess we'll leave the last 2 minutes of the podcast tonight to just the bashing of the garbage, or taking out the garbage. We'll end you end the night, end the holiday night with taking out the garbage to the curb. Let's end this podcast with taking the garbage out to the viewers. And the New York Giants and New York Jets are just both absolute dumpster fires. Maybe you could say for the Giants, they didn't quit last week. They were plucky, and you can make that your reason for keeping Brian Dable. I don't think they're in full tank, but DeVito's not healthy enough to start again. So it's Drew Lock for week number 2. And I'll tell you right now, if the Giants don't win this game against the Saints, I don't see another win coming for them the rest of the year.
Yeah, I guess we can kind of lump in everybody. We can kind of lump in the Giants and the Jets. You can kind of, because we're probably going to say the same stuff about them. Yeah, I was ready for the they didn't quit line. I was going to throw out the they didn't quit line. They were down 27-10 in the fourth quarter. They lost by 7. They're not quitting. Um, yeah. Locke, even though his passing numbers obviously weren't great, he did run for a little bit. He did run. He had 50-something yards rushing. But it seems like, even though they said the Giants aren't quitting, they're not giving full effort either, I don't think. And I just think they're just hearing so much of the outside noise about they're getting a quarterback next year. So I think they're kind of in coast mode right now. And if they do end up winning, if they're in the game against the Saints, they're playing the Saints. If they're in the game against the Saints, they'll try and win it. But I think the Giants and the Jets, I guess for that matter, are now in coast mode. and just kind of, riding out December until the offseason.
And the only thing I'll say about the Jets is they floated this out there. I want to say it was Evan Roberts, but I'm not 100% sure on WFAN. But um, the Jets should somehow start Tyrod Taylor at some point for the end of the season,
Why not?
because if he goes out there and makes the offense look competent, I mean, you could then put the death nail in the Aaron Rodgers conversation, because I think at this point you're giving excuses. You're like, oh, well, Rodgers has no time to throw. A lot of his passes look okay, except for a flubber here or there. But I feel like we're being tricked, and this is somebody who there might not have been a bigger supporter of the Jets. I picked them in my division parlay. I thought Aaron Rodgers would have an excellent year, an MVP type year. So I was totally fooled. I tend to believe that a lot of this, more of this, is on Rodgers than some people want to give him credit for.
Yeah, you would think that the Jets would want to at least find out what Tyrod Taylor can give them, especially when you have Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson. You have obviously those are two number one receivers. And if by chance, because you never know with Aaron Rodgers, you could never know. He might go into his darkness in January, February, and March and come out in April and then say, oh, I don't want to be here, or they get some kind of disagreement and he's out of there.
Yep.
Now, all of a sudden, the Jets don't have a quarterback. And Tyrod Taylor, from what he's proven over the years, he has proven nothing but he's a good average quarterback. And I'm not saying he's going to be a full-time starter, but he really hasn't gotten a chance, unfortunately, because of his injuries. He had that thing in San Diego a while back where the thing he got his lung punctured by the
Chargers.
doc. When he got his lung punctured by the doctor or something like that, and he was out
Yep.
for like the rest of the year. Then with the
That opened the door
Giants,
for Herbert. Yep.
the Giants, he had his thing. You need to see what you have, and it's not Aaron Rodgers. Even if he does start next year, it's Aaron Rodgers. Maybe next year would be his last year if he's going to play. And yeah, they're just, again, Jets are in coast mode. They were up 21-7 until Jet great Leonard Williams hit a pick six to the house. And it
They
was
should have
over
won the
from there.
game.
And it
Yeah.
was over from there. I remember texting you because it was going to mess up our picks. And then it was 21. It was 21-7. They were in the red zone. They were about to score and make it 28-7, I think. And then Leonard Williams pick six. It was 21-14, and you knew it was over from there.
Yep. So that brings a end to our podcast for this week. We have a lot. Again, there was a lot happened, a lot on the horizon for sports. Whether you're talking football and the fantasy playoffs will be decided. Maybe we'll talk a little fantasy if we can get lucky enough to get you in there in our league. And yeah, and basketball's heating up even more. Hopefully, we got a Juan Soto answer. So hopefully, all of that to come. Uh, God spares on next week's podcast. Dan, wrap it up for us.
Yeah, all right. So definitely have some Juan Soto news for next week. Definitely, we have Knicks Cup quarterfinals. When's that quarterfinals? Do you know when that quarterfinals is? I don't know. Maybe it's next. Whatever. But we have Knicks Cup quarterfinals. I'm not sure if that's next week. We'll have some more again. We'll have a lot more football headlines. We'll probably stop talking Giants Jets just because we'll probably just talk regular football because that's more exciting. And again, all right, keep liking, following, subscribing to us on Instagram, Facebook, X, YouTube. Definitely comment, argue. We'll bring it up on the podcast. So until next time, I'm Danny. This is Neil. Signing off.